A long history of Earth awaits everyone who studies this chapter, the geologic time scale. But why do we need to study this? Is this even legit? Humans are considered animals scientifically and are considered creatures bound to their genetic makeup. Studying our history, we can realize that we are close to our co-inhabitants, animals, plants, and organisms, and we share these characteristics with them. Humans are capable of conflict, taking care of one another, training and developing oneself, and working with other co-humans. And this is also exhibited by other animals as well. And in a biological perspective, this was all for the sole purpose of survival and perpetuation. Today, we will revisit the past and study the geologic timescale here in Earth and Life Science Rewind with your reviewers for Earth and Life Science. Greetings, senior high school students. I am teacher Gian and welcome to Earth and Life Science Rewind with your reviewers for Earth and Life Science. Today, we will discuss the important events and progression of the Earth's history, geologic time scale, from the Precambrian to the Cenozoic Era. The main objective for this video is to describe how the Earth's history can be interpreted to geologic scales. All the collective efforts of scientists and scholars have come together to picture at least a logical, cohesive, and realistic story of what happened before. We call it the geologic timescale. This is built upon from the long process of study and investigation of our fossils. The concept of relative dating, which is on the previous lesson, has taught us principles we needed to get the clues of the past, and including radiometric dating, the fossils and technological advances help in understanding our past. Paleontologists, or people who study fossils, characterize fossils as the remains or evidence of past organisms. Think of them as markers that serve as clues for building everything we know about prehistory. Fossils can form through mummification, which is dehydration of organisms. Also, they can be formed in amber, being stuck in hardened tree saps. Tar pits, which are thick petroleum formation that preserves animals. Also, they can be frozen. Cold climate prevents decaying and even rotting from happening. Petrification, being formed as a sedimentary rock. Traces like footprints, casts, molds, and coprolites also help being fossils. Now, it's time to revisit the past, study the eons and eras of our planet. But first, we need to understand that geologic timescale is divided into eons, eras, periods, and epoch. We have here the Precambrian divided into 3, and the Phanerozoic Eon, which is divided into also 3 eras. Also interesting to note that in a large book, we are only on the last page of this book, or in the latest page, which means that the human history is very short compared to the rest of the organisms that lived here. Now, we'll start with the first eon, the Cambrian Eon. It's the beginning of the Earth and 88% of the Earth's history. Precambrian is divided into 3. First, the Hadean Eon, which is hell-like with planetary bombardment and extensive volcanism. Basically, this is the start of the planet where it is starting to form, and it's basically like hell, like Hades. Archean Eon is when the Earth started cooling down, rocks are formed from magma, and water bodies have formed from cooling down. It is also interesting to note that this is the eon wherein the first organisms appeared, the Cyanobacteria. It's the first photosynthetic organisms that fed off carbon dioxide and converted them to oxygen. And the third eon of the Precambrian is the algae and bacteria populating in the Proterozoic Eon. So the Proterozoic Eon, we see the formation of the supercontinent Rodinia, and life began at sea. And there were other primitive organisms that existed in this eon: sponges, jellyfishes, and simple sea plants. Everything was going steady with algae, early plants supplying the oxygen, and the bacteria evolving and eating other organisms. But there were a few species, very few, and life still hasn't dominated the Earth. So this is the end of the Precambrian, and what happened is that all conditions for life are available. And then there was the Cambrian explosion. Cambrian explosion started the next eon, the Phanerozoic Eon. Is characterized by the visible light throughout the planet. And its first era is the Paleozoic Era. Paleozoic Era means old life. It began in an unexplained explosion in biological life, the Cambrian explosion. Paleozoic Era is characterized by life starting at the sea and moving towards the land. Paleozoic Era is also divided into 6 periods. What are the periods of the Paleozoic Era? Cambrian period. Cambrian period is the explosion in which new organisms, invertebrates, the first fishes, and life at the sea evolved. Invertebrates like Anomalocaris, trilobites, and sponges have dominated the sea, and they are the ancestors of the insects and crustaceans we have today. The Ordovician period is characterized by the diversification of the organisms. It means the diversification enabled the organisms to have other forms and other subspecies as well. Sea plants became diverse. The fishes chordates or the soon-to-be vertebrates formed, the cephalopods for the squid, starfishes, and other arthropods. We can also see here that there are proto-fishes, meaning fishes without jaws. This looks like janitor fish. These are proto-insects, and some plants are taking on rocks going to land. The Silurian period is the period wherein insects, vascular plants, jawed fishes, and large reefs are dominating the planet, especially at sea. Fishes are being preyed upon by invertebrates, like this one, and plants are evolving to live on land, alright? The Devonian period is the period known as the Age of Fishes, wherein they evolved to have diverse characteristics. Jawed fishes, fish that can possibly walk on land, predatory fishes, and prey. Or even were the proto-sharks or the chondrichthyes, or the first sharks. Ichthyostega were the first fishes with legs, and the Ariops are amphibians, the ancestors of frogs. Also interesting to note that insects were here to move towards land first. They were faster than fishes and other organisms, and they dominated the land first time. And it is followed by Carboniferous period. Carboniferous period has the highest oxygen content, and it is characterized with abundant forests. It enabled the insects to grow so large, and this is when the amphibians evolved into reptiles. Reptiles can be able to lay eggs on land, which is an advantage. And you can see here large dragonflies as wide as laptops, and Arthropleura. You can see here that it's a large version of the centipede. Other lizards have evolved as well, and you can see here that there are lots of vegetation. It increased the oxygen content of the atmosphere. And the last period in the Paleozoic is the Permian period. Permian is characterized by the formation of Pangaea, dry climate, which enabled reptiles to dominate this planet. There were also cone plants, therapsids, which are reptiles with fur, pelycosaurs, which will be the ancestor of dinosaurs, and diapsid reptiles. Diverse reptiles. And reptiles were expanding in this period. But a sudden and worldwide extinction happened, ending this period and the Paleozoic era by itself. So what is this extinction? We call it the Permian extinction or the Great Dying. When life recovered, it started the Mesozoic Era, which is 245 to 66 million years ago, and it is characterized by a shift of land life from sea life, and it's called the Age of Reptiles. We can also characterize this era as hot and humid climate, which helped the reptiles become more active and more populous. Mesozoic is divided into 3 periods. Triassic period is the rise of diapsid reptiles who survived the Permian extinction. These are now the pelycosaurs and other listosaurs, ichthyosaurs, and pterosaurs. Remember that they are not technically dinosaurs. Also, it is interesting to note that there are already mammals in the form of therapsids. Therapsids are the ancestors of the mammals today, like this one, the Megazostrodon. The Jurassic period is the second period in Mesozoic in which the dinosaurs reigned already. Aside from dinosaurs, they were angiosperms or cone plants, feathered reptiles like the Archaeopteryx, marine reptiles, and other diverse dinosaurs. The sauropods, which have long necks, and Velociraptor, which are small social animals. What about the mammals here? Most therapsid mammals are small mammals, just trying to survive and hiding from the bigger dinosaurs. Reptiles that lived during the Jurassic period is the plesiosaur, hadrosaurs, which have beaks, Deinonychus, which are feathered dinosaurs, which are the proto-birds, the ancestors of birds, and Giganotosaurs. The third period in the Mesozoic era is the Cretaceous, in which is characterized by the separation of Gondwana and Laurasia from being Pangaea. Contrary to popular belief, the T-Rex or the Tyrannosaurus Rex lived in the Cretaceous period and not the Jurassic period. Also the Triceratops, the Troodons, which are successors of raptors, crocodiles, flowering trees, and pollinators. It also saw the rise of placental mammals. Placental mammals are mammals that can give birth through uterus. like us humans. While dinosaurs thrived, mammals evolved to give birth, which will be the deciding factor in the next era. Also, the development of trees to bear fruits and flowers helped them survive the overgrazing of animals. These kinds of evolution will help them survive in the following extinction event, which is the KT extinction or the Cretaceous-Tertiary extinction. So what's the KT extinction? An asteroid impact was enough to annihilate majority of life on Earth. Molten lava and static light killed aerial animals, and terrestrial inhabitants could not take the heat and impact. It is theorized that most of the large animals were wiped out of the planet, but some of the animals like therapsids and small animals hid underground and were not heavily affected to avoid the extreme heat and impact of that KT extinction. The KT extinction is so severe that it would take 4 to 10 million years for that biodiversity to recover. But this extinction marked the end of the Mesozoic Era, the end of the reptiles being the dominant species on this planet. Then begins the Cenozoic Era, the age of mammals, but actually it started with birds dominating this planet. The Cenozoic Era is the age wherein the planet developed to what it is currently is. So the Cenozoic Era is what Earth looks like recently. The Cenozoic Era is divided into 2 periods. Actually, it was 3, but condensed into just 2. Tertiary is the first. Tertiary started with birds dominating, but ended with mammals adapting and overwhelming them. Before, the terror birds, which are the ancestors of ostriches, emus, and cassowaries, were the predators of this planet. But then, some mammals evolved to compete with terror birds, like Plesiadapiforms, the Hyaenodon, Oxyena, and other small reptiles like Titanoboa. Later on, there was another increase in temperature, which enabled the plants to grow bigger, and therefore, helping the herbivores to return. This gave rise to different kinds of mammals. Tertiary period is where we can see rainforests, old world monkeys, the ungulates or the ancestors of deers, horses, and camels, and eventually grass. Tertiary period was ended with a great break extinction or what we call the Ice Age, and another sort of continental drift which caused the mammals to diversify more in order to survive. And now we are in our current period, the second period of Cenozoic, the Quaternary, in which diverse fruit-bearing plants, the primates, the bear, saber-toothed cats, wolves, and the modern animals you see today. We have here artiodactyls, which are the antlers, and giraffes. We have the carnivores, cats, bears, and dogs. The equidae, zebra, pony, donkeys, and horses. And we have here primates, monkeys, apes, and humans. Also, Quaternary period gave rise to the Megafauna, the largest species of the mammals that we have today. And this proceeds to the prehistory that we have, starting with the hominids, Australopithecus, and the dawn of humans. So this is where it ends in this Reviewer Reviewer that we have today. That was long. A whole chapter of a book is even dedicated to geologic timescale. There's even a book discussing the geologic timescale. But the teacher Gian, has to condense it to the gist. So without further ado, let us summarize this video reviewer on geologic timescale. Geologic timescale is based on the collective information from scientists, paleontologists, and scholars. Geologic timescale is plotted through relative and absolute dating. Paleontologists use fossils as clues of what happened in prehistory. Geologic timescale is divided into eons, eras, periods, and epochs. Precambrian Eon saw the formation of the planet, cooling down, and development of microorganisms. Paleozoic Era started with an explosion of life at sea, moving towards the land, and ended with a mass extinction. Mesozoic Era started with the rise of reptiles, flowering plants, small mammals, and ending with another mass extinction. Cenozoic Era still occurs today, starting from the dominance of terror birds to the evolution of the current mammals and primates. We will now answer this short quiz to test your knowledge. Please pause this video and try to answer these 5 questions on a piece of paper. You can resume the video once answering and check your answers after. Video resumes in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Here are the answers from the Test Your Knowledge part. Thank you for watching this video reviewer, and I hope you have refreshed your lessons on this episode, the geologic timescale. It's a simplified version and it's a long lesson, so also visit your notes for other details and important events that I might have not discussed. Once again, this is Teacher Gian. See you next time in the Earth and Life Science 3-1 video reviewers for Earth and Life Science.